Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for attending our webinar today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We are recording today's session, and everybody that has registered will receive an email with a link to the on-demand version of the webinar and a copy of today's presentation slides as well. The session will run for a total of 60 minutes. Please note that we do have some Q&A time at the very end. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A panel on your GoToWebinar console, and we will address them towards the end of the presentation. If for some reason we don't have time to address all of the questions in today's live event, please be assured that we will follow up directly with you following the webinar to answer the various different questions. My name is Jonathan Smythe. I've been with Shea Global for 10 years now and have a background in production and commercial management, supplying Marks & Spencer. I also have 20 years of providing IT solutions to blue chip organizations. In my role as a commercial manager for Coates Viola, I very quickly understood the everyday challenges associated with running global supply chains. At the time, we were shipping goods from Morocco to the UK, and every day we were replanning and rebalancing production and the entire supply chain with the demand. It was a challenging and a very time-consuming process. In terms of Shea, just a little bit about us. So our vision is that we believe every business has the potential for excellence. So whenever we're engaging with prospects or with customers, we look to challenge our customers to look beyond the status quo and to make their businesses better. At Shea Global, our passion is guiding customers to achieving business excellence. Our team has many years of experience and expertise helping customers in a variety of different industries. We are an essential service according to the definition of the province of Ontario. We have and will continue to stay open to service our clients as we are a global provider of ERP solutions, CPM or corporate performance management solutions, BI or business intelligence, and of course, demand-driven technologies and solutions focused on transforming supply chains. Shea Global supports operations and organizations in 25 different countries, from offices in Canada, the US, the UK, India, and the Philippines. Whilst most of our projects are within the manufacturing and wholesale distribution space, we also focus in a number of different areas, such as aerospace and defense, automotive, consumer goods, electronics, fashion, food and beverage, machinery and equipment, medical devices, chemicals, plastics and rubber, and of course, pharmaceuticals. Our main speaker for the session today is Roger Fleury. Roger is the UK practice lead for Shea Global, having joined the group in 1995. Roger has over 30 years of experience of the implementation of ERP systems, with a current focus on Microsoft Dynamics and, of course, demand-driven supply chain solutions. Roger has a very hands-on approach and provides detailed pre-sales engagements and effective business consultancy to ensure that the appropriate use of ERP and sales and operations planning systems can be deployed in our customer sites. So what I'm now going to do is to hand over to Roger, and Roger is going to handle the bulk of our presentation today around real-world supply chain planning using demand-driven MRP.
Hello, everybody. My aim today is to take you through the reasons why I believe adopting a demand-driven approach will bring huge benefits to your businesses. I will walk you through some of the issues involved in getting started. In the latter part of the webinar, I will focus on the specific benefits that our demand-driven solution can offer you. This slide was written last year, well before the current crisis. What was written then, I feel, is even more relevant now. The current crisis has forced attention on the weaknesses of certain businesses' supply chains and the assumptions that drive them. As we now start to move into the phase of deciding where business is headed, for many, a radically different approach is necessary to survive and prosper in the future. The good news is, to achieve this, the one variable that can be changed the quickest is management assumptions. I would suggest that now is the time to consider the benefits of a demand-driven solution. Managers make so many assumptions in their day-to-day decision-making. They have to cope. They have to, just to cope. The consequences of those decisions, however, define their business. Strategic decisions on inventory investments, distribution networks, production and warehouse capacity, all of these would change when looked at from a demand-driven, flow-based perspective. Operationally, departmental decisions work often against the common goal when looked at holistically. Preconceived ideas and assumptions, again, drive most operational targets. Productivity bonuses increase profitability. Large batch sizes drive machine efficiency. Lowest cost sourcing goes straight to the bottom line. All these may hold true, but not at the expense of flow. Beyond the point, the drive for efficiency and utilization forces flow to slow down. Promoting and protecting flow is the way to maximize return on investment for businesses. Demand-driven is grounded in the philosophy of flow, first defined by George W. Ploss. Flow will require a fundamental shift in what we seek to protect and promote at all levels of the company. Flow is something simple and intuitive, yet it's highly elusive in today's conventional management structure. The good thing about flow is when it's present, the results are obvious across an organization. Sadly, the pursuit of flow is not practiced in many organizations today. In the face of conflicting demands from other areas, most planners learn quickly to be expert plate spinners. Old planning models are often based on creating inaccurate forecasts, usually agreed by an internal committee of less than enthusiastic contributors, only to drive an inflexible MRP system or reorder point system to generate daily recommendations and change action. No surprise then that they are generally ignored by planners and schedulers. This has to be the critical business process that needs to be consigned to the past. We need a new way of thinking, a new management model, a new solution based on flow. This brings us to demand-driven material requirements planning, or DDMRP for short. DDMRP is a method to model, plan, and manage supply chains to protect and promote the flow of relevant information and materials. DDMRP is based on strategically placed decoupling points to drive supply order generation and management throughout the supply chain. Relatively new to most people, demand-driven was, however, first introduced to the world in 2011 in the third edition of Orlick's Material Requirements Planning book after 15 years of research and application. So it's not actually a new concept. Flow is a unifying concept with the major process improvement disciplines and their respective primary objectives. The theory of constraints by Goldratt aims to drive system throughput. Lean by Ono aims to reduce waste. Six Sigma by Deming aims to reduce variability. All these objectives are advanced by focusing on flow. How flow is managed and promoted forms the basis of the demand-driven approach. Demand-driven works by acknowledging that to bring stability to supply networks, you have to have the right amount of inventory as a cushion against uncertainty. This principle drives the definition of buffer positions throughout the supply network, calculated to have just the right amount of inventory based on actual demand signals. How buffers work, how they adapt, how they promote flow, all this is covered by learning more about the principles of DDMRP. What I will say here and now is, in real companies with real people, all you need to know is buffers do actually work. DDMRP builds on the well-understood principles of MRP and Lean, but manages to go further by introducing four main innovations. The first innovation, the decoupled lead time, accurately defines the reaction time needed to respond to demand. This forms the basis of the core of demand-driven calculations. It's a very simple concept, but very powerful in execution. With this simple concept, buffers can be sized correctly to support operational needs. To trigger demand, reorder recommendations, the second innovation, the net flow equation, was devised. Just like the decoupled lead time, it's simple to understand and flexible in its application. Forecasting can be a critical element in determining net flow, but it doesn't have to be. Part of the power of the demand-driven methodology is allowing the right methods and data to be applied where needed. The third innovation allows propagation of demand through the bills of materials and distribution network, essential to get the full picture across the supply chain. Crucially, the decoupled explosion achieves this without the bullwhip effect that causes the yo-yo changes to recommendations that has traditionally plagued MRP systems. Independent dependence may sound contradictory, but it works. The fourth innovation is often the hardest to initially accept, but the easiest to follow in practice. Due date compliance is a mantra that is ingrained in almost all systems I've encountered over the last 30 years. So it's no wonder that people take some convincing to take a different path. Understanding the concept of priority over due date, however, brings real simplicity to order execution systems. Taken as a whole, the demand-driven approach can be summed up in 3 words: position, protect, pull. Through innovation, it fuses key planning requirements with today's prominent flow-based improvement methodologies. This slide encapsulates both the mindset change of demand-driven and the practical approach it offers to supply chain management. The challenge most businesses would love to achieve with their inventory planning and execution systems is right place, right quantity, 100% of the time. Sadly, most businesses struggle with this task. They generally have too much of the wrong stuff and too little of the right stuff. Demand-driven does not strive to give a perfect result. In the real world, this can never exist. Instead, what can exist is an optimal range that delivers a balanced response to the often contradictory business requirements. Lowest purchase cost versus best quality, lowest inventory versus highest customer service, highest productivity versus minimal bottleneck. DDMRP is proven to allow companies to plan and execute in this optimum range. And when that is achieved, then I would hope you find the potential results compelling. These, as I show here, these are not extreme examples of what can be achieved. They may sound too good to be true, but the fact is many companies have already made the transition to demand-driven and achieved similar benefits for their businesses. There are many other positive consequences of pursuing the demand-driven approach, none more so than having a robust system that can cope inherently with change, both internal and external. There are now many examples of businesses around the world that have achieved such success by implementing demand-driven systems. One such business that I know well is Protea Chemicals. They achieved the success you see here in the face of many hurdles, but I do not see them resting on their laurels. They are now definitely a business that can do more with less. They see demand-driven very much as a process of continuous improvement, and I look forward to working with them for many years to come. What value should businesses place on having a sustainable, easily understood planning system, inherently able to cope with variability, that reacts to real customer demand while allowing specific company rules to be incorporated? Demand-driven is not just about reorder planning and inventory reduction, though. The methodology covers a whole suite of fundamental issues about the way a business organizes itself to satisfy the customer. The demand-driven operating model, DDOM for short, can impact all areas of a business. In its fully implemented model, the demand-driven operating model allows high-level business aims, the strategy, to be effectively turned into practical policy decisions and implemented as operational rules in a demand-driven model. Demand-driven offers a clearly defined methodology for bringing improvement to all areas of the business. I will not pretend this is easy to achieve, and it cannot be done in one step. The Demand-Driven Institute identifies 5 main stages in demand-driven maturity. These are not fixed stages, more an evolution over time. Critical to this process is understanding your true customer needs. Delivering what they consider important will lead to competitive advantage. Moving towards a demand-driven adaptive enterprise leads to an ability to deliver demand-driven differentiation. I intend to focus in detail on this enterprise-wide operational model in the future webinar. As you can see from this slide, demand-driven is a journey, so you have to start somewhere, even if you're not completely sure where you're headed. Businesses can have challenges implementing DDMRP, so let's look at what hurdles occur and how to move past them to drive better results sooner. The first thing to say is that you'll almost certainly already have what you need to start demand-driven. The 2 key ingredients, people and data, just need to be viewed and organized differently. Once you understand the demand-driven principles, that will not be that difficult. There's nothing new about implementing a successful demand-driven operating model, DDOM for short. All the lessons learned over many years from implementing ERP apply. It's generally not about the software and the technology. It's generally about the process and the people. Putting in a demand-driven operating model is going to focus on the planning supply chain departments, but there will naturally be impacts on many other areas of the business. You must always remember to marry local and departmental requirements with wider corporate goals. Unlike with ERP, one difference with demand-driven is that most director or C-level decision makers today do not have a basic understanding of the principles involved. With ERP implementations, you can sort of take that basic appreciation for granted. If you want to truly transform the operational effectiveness of an organization, you need buy-in from the top all the way down to the bottom. Another difference, this time much more positive to ERP, is that the financial justification for demand-driven should be much easier to define right from the beginning. So defining the scope and goals is essential, which may mean you need to bring in outside expertise to help. As with any change processes, having defined the scope, you then have to review your potential constraints, starting with data and people. Thankfully, the core data requirements of demand-driven are very basic. A list of stock items and their on-hand quantities with a definition of how they are reordered, usually a simple make, buy, or transfer flag. A list of open supply orders, both internal production and externally purchased, and a list of demand for each item over a suitable period. And that's it. 10% of your data defines the supply network and product characteristics. The other 90% of the data is needed to calculate the ADU, the average daily usage. The ADU is a key metric you will live and breathe for demand calculation. I would always try to avoid complications of stock reservations and allocations. Buffered stock is designed to supply all known demand. Adding complexity is what's best done once you've established a working system. Units are measured conversions, batch expiry dates, alternative suppliers, capacity constraints. All of these complications can be accommodated later. Data may be boring, but it's essential to have for a successful demand-driven solution. The good news is, as I previously said, you can use the data you have. Data management is best done at source, so this usually means in your existing ERP system. Remember, nothing is perfect, but you can always improve as you go along. Some basics are a necessity. Missing lead times and preferred suppliers, incorrect costs, all are common errors that creep into the best of managed systems. Accuracy starts to matter when looking at historic demand, open demand, and replenishment orders. Being aware of the errors in your core systems means you can allow for them when planning from a demand point of view. Often some data tends to be not kept up to date, not used, or generally ignored. This is why often minimum order quantities and economic quantities are often incorrect. Being able to categorize your products means you'll be able to apply different rules in demand-driven. So identifying from the start suitable policy groups in your data will be helpful. To get started with demand-driven, remember only to use what you really need. It's easy to overcomplicate things due to ill-conceived ideas about what is a necessity. For a pilot, if you can, our recommendation is to start without forecasts, without bombs. They can always be added later. The second constraint is your people. Education is the second foundation stone of a successful demand-driven implementation. Use the people you have. The current planners should know your business. They just don't know demand-driven yet. There are then different audiences depending on how involved they will be in the operation of the demand-driven solution. To that end, the second part of the mindset shift involves working not only with members of the planning team, but also communicating with all other departments. Ideally, no one in an organization should be left out. Appropriate training and education will make a difference. To that end, DD is a great way to introduce the concept of demand-driven and flow, and works best with multidisciplinary teams. DD is an ideal way to bring understanding to the rest of the business outside of those who live and breathe planning on a day-to-day basis. It's a great forum to discuss the issues facing an organization and how repeating the same old solutions will not lead to lasting improvement. Let's take a finance department, for example. Most financial teams will be focused on the unit price of inventory, which in turn often leads to buying in bulk. However, buying in bulk is only cheaper when you're not left with a pile of unused inventory. And it's contrary to the mindset of flow. In order to truly implement DDMRP, the financial team needs to understand and appreciate this. A DD Workshop is ideal in a way to build up the right mindset. The demand-driven planner course, however, is the critical foundation for any project, as the key people truly need to understand the principles of demand-driven. This course can be done by self-study through the Demand-Driven Institute. It can be done online with an instructor, or when we can all meet up again, it can be done on site in person with an instructor. I find passing the Demand-Driven Planner exam is one way of validating that this knowledge has sunk in. And indeed, many organizations that have gone down the demand-driven route make it a mandatory requirement for their staff in the planning and scheduling departments to have passed this exam. Once education is in place and data available, then how long do you take and what do you do? Well, that depends, but make it as short as practical. A 3-month pilot with products that have, say, 4 weeks lead time could easily cover 6 replenishment cycles under demand-driven rules, more than enough to see a difference. By focusing on purchase items, it's easier to learn the ropes than with complex manufacturing items with bombs and capacity constraints. The key to any demand-driven implementation is that it's sensitive to each unique business requirement. It's quite possible to apply standard methodology and a standard software solution to a completely unique business model when you take the right approach and challenge all the assumptions as they occur. Nobody is saying that moving to a demand-driven methodology is easy and it's going to be done and dusted in 3 months, but you can certainly fully embrace the new methodology in that time. Remember, the 2 main reasons for a pilot are to educate the people involved and to generate confidence in the rest of the business. To that end, the pilot should not be a proof of concept. Once it is finished, you should actually be managing the chosen product range with demand-driven. Even better, if it's a chosen supplier you're working with, you should understand your change priorities based on color, not due date. This is a critical issue when first starting out with your pilot. It becomes even more critical when staff changes happen, which they always do. Otherwise, the investment in demand-driven can easily be pushed aside by decisions made through ignorance of the methodology. Regular review with staff and introductory training sessions at high level may be all that is needed for most people. Can you imagine the impact of a new finance director joining who has not heard of demand-driven? Get it right, and everybody will continue to talk red, yellow, green. I'll now move on to a review of what an actual demand-driven solution could look like. Here at Shay, we are committed to using cloud-based solutions to allow our customers to concentrate on solutions and deliver real business process improvement. From our point of view, what is common to both digital transformation and demand-driven is that they both require a mindset change. They're both a challenge to the status quo, and they both basically mean a rewriting of the rule book. To deliver demand-driven or digital transformation successfully requires focus on the end goals and not on the current way of doing things. Using the cloud just means being able to deliver faster and respond quicker to change. Without changing your ERP system, cloud deployment for demand-driven allows us to quickly deliver more flexibility than your current MRP and planning systems. Our cloud-based solutions are powered by B2Ys. They are fully approved by the Demand-Driven Institute. In partnership with B2Ys, we have developed out-of-the-box integration with multiple ERP systems, including Dynamics, SAP, and Syspress. Here at Shea, we combine the depth of knowledge of demand-driven methodologies with wide-ranging experience in all Microsoft Dynamics products and strong technical expertise in cloud-based solutions. Hence, our flagship solution is DDMRP for Dynamics. In the next few slides, I hope to show you some of the key benefits that our solution will bring to your business. Making the complex simple is always a challenge. When the complex changes every day, this is especially challenging. Demand-driven is focused on allowing normal people to manage such complexity, and generally color is a good way of doing it. Very simply, green is good, yellow is normal, red is a warning, dark red is a priority. Screens like this make the everyday work of planners much, much easier. What works in planning works in execution. A demand-driven planner or scheduler soon learns the mantra: look after the buffers and the buffers will look after you. This means a radical change in viewpoint where due dates are no longer the main performance indicator. The execution alert column in this screen does not need much interpretation, even from someone completely new to demand-driven who would not otherwise know the priorities. So from an execution point of view, blue needs review. Green is good, yellow is normal, red is a warning, dark red is a priority. Here we also have a lead time alert showing overdue orders where the buffer is green, questioning whether they're really needed at all. We also have buffers in dark red where the supply orders are not yet overdue, so due date management wouldn't apply. But however, given that the buffer is in dark red, then they definitely need chasing all the same. This way, execution and planning under demand-driven go hand in hand. Looking forward and predicting the future is a critical part of the plan as well. So being able to see the impact on the supply chain is invaluable. Managing product life cycles, pre-launches, launches, ramp-ups, product maturity, product decline. All these need to be managed from a demand point of view, as well as options for big events and promotions and not so big component substitutions and batch inquiries, expiry dates. Full visibility of all such events and changes can be achieved with our demand-driven solution. Inventory positioning across a multi-echelon supply chain network is a major challenge for many businesses. Working out where to put where across company, country, location is critical. This view demonstrates our functionality that supports collaborative planning and replenishment across the whole internal and external network of companies, locations, bill of materials, and suppliers. Forecasting and demand-driven also go hand in hand. How forecasts are used may be different in demand-driven, but predicting trends and seasonality and events are all parts and essential parts of planning. Whether the forecast is manually created, statistically calculated, or AI-driven, whatever the forecast source, demand-driven can benefit from accurate forecasts. If they turn out to be less than accurate, then demand-driven has strong coping mechanisms for dealing with disappointment, otherwise known as variability. The forecasting industry today is obsessed with getting it right, but generally the results that are achieved are often, at best, mediocre. I'm certainly not saying that forecasting has no place in today's planning solution, but I am saying it's worth challenging the assumptions behind them and the reliance placed on them. Carol Patak, one of the founders of the Demand-Driven Institute, has a saying she likes to use: to be roughly right is better than to be precisely wrong. Appropriate KPIs make management by exception possible. Flow alerts, potential stockouts, especially potential stockouts with demand, all help focus on the day's priorities. A demand-driven solution has built-in KPIs that can be honed to fit as required. A few further examples to follow. Stock on hand management goes to the heart of demand-driven. Ensuring buffers can cope with demand without excess stock requires various tools. KPIs for 12-month reviews, monthly analysis, charting quantities and values, all require flexibility in presentation. Displayed here is an example of same KPI in two different guises, designed to suit two different needs. Some KPIs require a change in mindset. Compare supplier performance with supplier disruption. Supplier performance based on time in full just indicates that the supplier did or did not do as requested. On time in full does not indicate if the product was actually needed on the day of delivery. That's not to say a poor on time in full is acceptable. It's obviously, the better it is, the better the indicator of reliability of supply. But supplier disruption gives a much better indicator of what relationships need to be improved first by matching delivery to demand. A poor on time in full, if quality is good and the price is right, can be acceptable if a supply has a low disruption factor. Nobody is suggesting that you ditch your existing suppliers just for the sake of it, but with a demand-driven mindset, you can find efficiencies with existing suppliers in your own planning and in your own planning process to create a more agile business. And finally, order compliance. This is a very interesting KPI. Demand-driven aims to be a system that you can rely on, using its order recommendations 100%. Where a supplier is not happy with a recommendation, then a preferred adjustment to the rules can be made to better reflect the reality of what's happening, not just to ignore the recommendation, so that the next time the system makes a recommendation, it's going to be more accurate. This KPI tracks every time an order recommendation is ignored. So now you know that something needs to be done, if only to have a talk with your planning team. I certainly don't see any ERP systems tracking this type of metric. Then, to bring it all together in a single glance, we have a dashboard, the workbench. Planners often need to manage chaos, so we believe information at the fingertips is essential. Visual, intuitive, with the ability to fine-tune to specific circumstances. Means we often hear the requirement about management by exception, but we truly believe that with demand-driven, we can make that a reality. Demand-driven does not strive for the perfect result. In the real world, that can never exist. What can exist is a balance between often contradictory business requirements. Lowest purchase cost versus better quality. Lowest inventory versus higher customer service. Maximum productivity versus minimal bottlenecks. DDMRP, demand-driven, is proven to allow companies to plan and execute in the optimum range. This means flow is protected and promoted. This means return on capital is employed is increased. There are so many soft and hard benefits of thinking demand-driven that a basic implementation will pay for itself many times over, and at the same time will open up many avenues of improvement for an organization to explore. In the short term, demand-driven planning allows us to drive inventory reduction while maintaining customer service. That in itself must be a good reason to consider it. There are then further gains over the long term. The idea of reducing lead times leads to agility in your business and the taking on of less risk. There is nothing wrong in just implementing a simple demand-driven operating model to reduce inventory without a grand plan in place. The results will speak for themselves, and most companies will then see the future potential in the context of the demand-driven adaptive enterprise. So, some key lessons to take away. Like most projects, get senior management buy-in. This is common with most change processes. It's even more so with demand-driven, as it influences and is influenced by every area of the business. Sales, finance, operations, even IT, all have a contribution to make to demand-driven long-term success. Love your data. Understand it, clean it, use it. Data is the lifeblood of demand-driven. Get educated. Everyone needs to understand demand-driven. As in most specialist areas, some people need to understand it more than others. Challenge every assumption. Demand-driven means taking a new point of view for most people. This means having to throw out a lot of what people do on a day-to-day basis. So whatever you do, keep it simple. And finally, keep going. Demand-driven should be for life and not just to hit initial targets. You'll find there's always more you can achieve once you have the right tools at your command. Sales and operations planning for us should be at the heart of any business. Joined up thinking, planning, and execution is not easy, but the benefits are clear to see in those businesses that practice it. To deliver change, you need to empower your people with the right tools, both systems and thoughtware. Having a demand-driven operating model for your business will give you those tools. Thank you for listening. I think we'll now take questions.
Thank you, Roger. That was a very interesting insight into the real-world supply chain planning using DDMRP. So we have a couple of questions already that have come through. The first question is, in a post-COVID-19 world, how might we be able to deploy the DDMRP solution with a new customer?
Well, the obvious thing that jumps out there is that we can't do it face-to-face. We'd have to do it remotely. I think from our point of view, installing software and solutions in the cloud gets over location issues. The education side of it, with the demand-driven plan now being available online, means there's no real barriers to starting a project in demand-driven at this moment in time. Much of demand-driven is about changing people's mindsets. So whether we're talking face-to-face or talking over Skype or Teams or Zoom or whatever the conference calling software you want to use, it's about engaging and understanding the differences between your current operations and demand-driven. So I don't believe doing things remotely would stop us doing a good implementation.
Okay, thank you. And another question is, does DDMRP work as well in a retail environment in comparison to a traditional manufacturing and distribution environment?
Well, I think demand-driven now has enough of a track record in many different industries to know that anywhere where inventory is a key part of the business process, availability from the buffer allows demand-driven to bring benefits to the business. Now that applies equally in retail, distribution, manufacturing, repetitive manufacturing, make-to-order, configured-to-order manufacturing. All of these types of businesses have successfully implemented DDMRP. The difference is that the actual rules model that they'd apply will be different. Obviously, the lead times for a person, ideally when this crisis is over, walking into a shop and expecting to pick up a product straight away compared to a highly complex capital goods product that might take months to source, they're very different. But the principles of demand-driven can be applied to all those different businesses. It's just the rule base and the that needs to be applied to the individual products needs to be adjusted.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Thank you. And another question that has just come through. Does B2Wise have scheduling capability to support DDMRP and the demand-driven operating model?
Well, the demand-driven covers two main areas. It covers planning and it covers execution. In terms of our solution, we apply demand-driven principles with the color prioritization, both on the planning side and on the execution side. So scheduling open orders according to priorities driven by demand driven with capacity constraints where appropriate is totally feasible in our solution.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. And another question, they're coming through. Which parts of the ERP's MRP system would still be used or not used anymore after implementing demand-driven MRP?
Well, I think businesses can make that choice for themselves in as much that demand-driven can completely replace the old MRP engine in an ERP system, but it doesn't have to. I think that's down to the scope of the project and the implications and the practical implications of implementing a system. The downside of having a dual methodology of some part of the business running MRP and the other half of the business or some part of the business running demand-driven means there's going to be contradictions between the two. So from a recommendation point of view, obviously we would be suggesting that you're going to get the best benefit from the highest synergy if you roll out demand-driven across a complete organization. But realistically, when implementation plans can take months to implement across complex organizations, then we naturally have experience of running MRP and DDMRP in parallel.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Roger. And in terms of the DDMRP solution, is it true to say that it would ordinarily just be the planners that are using DDMRP, or is there the possibility to roll it out to other interested parties in the supply chain?
I think from an architecture point of view, being in the cloud, it means anybody can access it through a browser. The question is, why would somebody want to see the data and the information that's there? Obviously, on a day-to-day basis, planners and schedulers need to be working daily within a DDMRP environment. If you look in terms of being able to provide information to suppliers, then being able to give on-demand information in terms of priorities through a portal, perfectly practical. If you look internally to an organization and you've got questions from a customer service or a sales and marketing point of view, then there's information in a demand-driven model that is just as relevant to them as it is to the supply chain planners. So I think from a practical point of view, depending on how far you go down the journey towards the demand-driven adaptive enterprise, you'll find more and more people will need access to your demand-driven system.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was a great answer. Okay, so I think we have run through all of the questions that have come through the Q&A panel. It's highly likely, as often happens with me when I come away from a presentation and I'm thinking about what it is I've viewed, that I have further questions. And certainly, if you have any questions after this session, then please feel free just to send them through to us and we'll get back in touch with you to help you with any of those. And I think all that remains is for me to say thank you very much, Roger, for taking us through this presentation today, covering real-world supply chain planning with DDMRP. I think you've deserved a well-earned cup of tea or gin and tonic in the sunshine. So thank you very much. Excellent. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Goodbye.